What's up, everyone? This is Cameron, of course. It's a video I've been wanting to make for a while. I'm going to be talking about getting out of debt. So, if that video is not for you, then feel free to leave. But if this is something where you've been thinking about getting out of debt or just watching videos on repeat for motivation because it's something that's hard to start, or you're in the middle of doing it and you just need some reminders of why to keep doing it and why to keep going. I'm just going to talk about kind of a brief. I'm going to talk for maybe hopefully like 10 minutes or so about my story about it and how my wife and I got out of debt and how hard it was and how easy it was and just all the little details that I can remember right now. I'm not super organized about it. I have a little bit of a list in front of me of like little talking points, but I'm just going to kind of talk. I keep putting this video off and I just want to go. So thank you for watching. Yeah, getting out of debt. It is it's a thing that people have a lot of mixed emotions about. There's all sorts of good and bad debt people talk about, and an obsession with your credit score, and also all sorts of it just all matters how you were raised. If you learned anything new along the way, like it all matters on who you've surrounded yourself with as you've gotten older, with how you feel about debt. One of the biggest things my wife and I realized years ago was that as dumb as this sounds, we went to college, and neither of us really had an idea of what we wanted to do when we went to college. I know I went and the program that I actually wanted to pursue wasn't even there yet, so I just chose something that was close, which is like the dumbest thing you can do, in my opinion. I really was just going because up until that point, everybody was like, so what are you going to go to college for? And of course I wanted to go, but it's similar to like anything else. You just grow up hearing that you have to do something a certain way and nobody's ever told you any differently. So you're just like, it wasn't weird to think like, okay, I'm going to go to college, even though I have no clue why. Like, all I know is college good. Like that's all we really think about. But before you know it, I've got, I don't know, like $10,000 in student loan debt, which isn't a lot compared to other people because I had like some grants that paid for most of it. But I went to college for free for a little bit, and then then I had to start paying for it. And by the time I started paying for it, I was just kind of going so that I didn't have to tell anybody that I wasn't going. Pretty much it's just wasting time and money at that point. I'm not learning anything really, just adding stress to my plate and not really having any solid idea of what I actually wanted. My wife was pursuing an education towards a career that she thought just because of her childhood she wanted to do. And before you know it, she was actually kind of having a job in that field. Turns out everybody in that field that she encountered hated their life. So she was like, man, I really don't want this. She was super stressed out during that time period. And before you know it, I think she had like $40,000 in student loan debt or something along those lines. Fast forward us getting married, we now combine that. We have 2 car payments totaling like $700 a month or something. And both of those loans are somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000 each. And we start utilizing credit cards at that point, and at that but we turned around one day and we had like $10,000 in credit card debt at some point. We were like, what happened? That was about as worse as it got. Now, if yours is worse than that or less than that, one thing that when I was getting out of debt before I started, one thing that I did the most was I just listened to videos of people's stories like this over and over again. And though I didn't connect with all of them or relate to every single one, some of them had to do with collection agencies, which I haven't had an issue with. Some of them had to do with like family stealing money, which of course I've never had to deal with. Like, I say of course, maybe you have had to deal with that, but just for me, I haven't. It's not that you can't relate to other people's situations, but what it does is it gives you an idea of where you are on the spectrum of extreme. Just finding out where you are and having some perspective of how good or bad your situation is like one of the most helpful things, because it motivates you there's always somebody who's got it worse, no matter what. And knowing that it feels like you already have a little bit of a head start. So again, that's why I'm talking about it. Anyway, we kind of handled all that credit card debt slowly before we actually got on a plan, right? It was before we actually started tackling it intentionally. I ended up quitting my job to pursue a business that I started with a friend of mine. That was going good for almost a year, and then the world shut down. And we were still making money, but it was slowly declining. And right in there is when we started like turning around and being like, you know what, let's start this. What made me start it was my wife and I had like $6,000 or so, maybe $7,000 in a savings account. It's the first time we've ever done that. It was like the most money we've had in our account that we've actually saved up. And I turned around and was like, I think I want to pay my car off, because at that point my car had about $7,000 left on it. This amount would just clean my car out, and we'd no longer have a $350 car payment. So I went to my wife after just listening to a bunch of videos and was like, hey, I think we should do this, because it frees up $350 each month, and that's $350 less we have to come up with at the end of each month. And I think it definitely threw her off, but she was like, okay, all right, let's do it. Like, I think she was just excited that I was like really into trying to do something. And we did it. And the feeling of that was like something I've never felt before. It was this huge relief. And within 2 weeks, I got a paper in the mail that was like my title. And it was like, you own this. And the feeling wasn't even cool about owning my car. It was just knowing that, like, okay, since I had started a business, or even if you just have a job, it's like, all right, this is $350 a month that I no longer have to make, which means that if I do make it, it's $350 extra. So if you're crazy in debt, then that's $350 that you can start plowing towards another debt. And for those of you who are into the whole plan of getting out of debt, this is nothing new to you. It's just the snowball method, really. I mean, it's the most popular method to getting out of debt, I think, that most people use. And it's just pay off one debt and apply that new amount that's free straight up towards another debt and tackle them, usually smallest to biggest. See, this was out of order. This was not our smallest debt. So depending on who you follow and what kind of debt method you want to follow, that's not how we did it. We started with a car payment, and that gave us so much momentum to start with that's what sparked the whole journey through it. After that, we went towards her car payment, and her car had double what my loan had on it, even though we took out the loans at the same time, and they were approximately the same size of a loan. When it first started, the bank for her car, something got messed up, and it was supposed to take out a payment every 2 weeks instead of paying, like mine was only you pay it once a month like normal. Hers was you pay it every 2 weeks, and it was a smaller amount. But something happened where it only ever auto drafted that once a month. So for years, we only paid half of a car payment, and nobody ever said anything. And we didn't say anything because sometimes it saved us. So her loan was behind, which means that if we ever wrecked that car, we were screwed. It was literally like going to sleep sometimes is stressful, just knowing like, man, if I get in a wreck tomorrow, we don't know what we're going to do with that loan, because we just owe all of that now, like without any kind of, and which it was on us. We recognized it and just kept quiet. But we were like, you know what? Let's kill this debt too. What we did at that point was, at the end of each month, we would just calculate how much extra we had made. And of course, at this point, we're living, and I'll probably make several videos about this, because this video is already like on my clock, like 10 minutes long, and I'm not really organized. I'll go into details, especially if certain people have questions. But every week we would talk about like how much we spent on this. We'd have categories, and we have a weekly grocery list, and it got to the point where we were being pretty particular about it. And I wouldn't necessarily say we had a budget that we stuck to. It was all how little can we spend. It wasn't, okay, we have this much to spend in these areas like the big debt methods recommend. We've never done a budget. But we paid off $60,000 of debt in 8 months. And we don't make an insane amount of money either. So it's not like we both make like $100,000 a year, or even total $100,000 a year. We don't even make that. So I don't want you to think that like, well, yeah, if you make a bunch of money and just stop spending, then no, that's not what we did. It was just a combination of every little win that we came across, and before you know it, we paid off the last $13,000 or more of her car, and her car was just done. And now we have $700 some freed up a month. And the funny thing is that they don't talk about as much is when you start paying off debts and freeing up stuff like $700 that you never had extra to spend, you pay off debts faster, because now you're not saving. Let's say you're able to save $500 at the end of the month. Well, once you pay off those two debts like we did, the car payments, now you have like $1,200 some to put towards debts. Not five. You're literally more than doubling what you were able to do before. So you're just paying things off twice as quickly. Once we got the two cars paid off, we went down to the lowest student loans. So that was like, there were some I think she had student loans that were like a bunch of little different ones. So there were some that were like $100 some payment a month or whatever. Or there was like a total where like the total loan was actually only for like $1,000. So it was split up into like the tiniest payments over the course of forever. And a lot of people are like, why would you pay off student loans? Like, because student loans suck. Like, why have them? Like, why have a car payment? Like, a lot of people are really against not having a car payment. And that, I mean, I don't have a problem if somebody has a car payment, of course. It's not mine. And, I don't plan on ever having a car payment again, but who knows, I guess. If you can live without one, it's awesome. I don't know. It's hard to talk about because people have a lot of strong feelings about it. And you talk about how cool not having a car payment is. And you on the other side of the camera, depending on how you feel, will ultimately just, possibly immediately throw up walls or resistance to that idea like it's stupid. And it's like, I've done both, so I personally know which one feels better. And I can't really argue about it. But tackling those debts smallest to largest, as you probably already have heard 100 times over, that's the way to do it. And, it was really hard, especially halfway through. We felt the fatigue of practicing this. It was difficult because, we love to like go out to dinner and go to movies and do all these things. And, we were getting stimulus checks whenever everybody was getting those. And we never once bought anything with them. I don't think. I think every single time we got one, it went straight towards a debt. We never once got to take one of those and be like, ooh, something fun. Like, nope. We got a tax return right in the middle of that, and it was our biggest tax return I think we'd ever had, which is small compared to some people, but I think it was like $4,000, which that in its own category is stupid that we would even get a tax return that big, because if we were handling stuff correctly money-wise, it would actually be smaller than that. We'd have more money in the long run. But anyway, that straight towards debt. So, I mean, just counting stimulus checks alone and a tax return, that's almost $10,000, maybe $7,000. So, I mean, you're dropping a huge chunk of that whole debt number just with just extra random, what do they call them? Windfall money situations that just happened. But we just worked really hard as much as we could and tried to spend as little as we could. And again, at the end of each month, we would just be like, all right, how much money do we have to throw at debt? And we would subtract everything, pay our house, and just have, I think there was one month where we actually saved I think it was with some stimulus check stuff, or maybe it was even the tax return month or whatever. But there was one month where I think it was like almost $10,000 we had, which we had never even seen before in one thing. We were like, how did we do this? And it was just because of the momentum. Some of the debts were gone, like all this stuff. And you don't realize how much money you're paying towards stuff every month. And we were canceling every damn subscription that we had. Like, it was fun, kind of. And if you made it this far in the video, like, all you've heard me talk about is vague little stories about stuff, but the biggest piece of how this works, if you have like a partner or a spouse or whatever, the biggest thing is you guys getting on the same page. Because at first, My wife, she was just doing it because I was kind of passionate about doing it. And then once it kicked in on her end, I was kind of, getting worn out on it. And she was definitely in it, but she somehow got more, like, there was a bunch of reasons, but all you need to know is she got a new wave of motivation when I was kind of down about it. And once that happened and we both got motivated again, it was like a huge round 2. And we started tackling the rest of that debt like crazy. And for those of you who haven't done it or aren't there yet, when you get towards those last debts that are the big ones, which in this instance, they should have been our cars, but we just killed those at first. We had like a $13,000 or $14,000 student loan. That was our last like monster that we had to kill, and that one took a while, and it's just so boring and it's not sexy, and you just have to like slowly chip away at it. But before you knew it, it was gone, and we clocked our last debt payment at 8 months, which is really fast for that amount of debt from what I've seen other people do. So I'm going to make more videos of these things. If you're interested, I'd love for you to ask questions so that I can narrow down topics to talk about, because it's a huge universe of things to talk about in just, I'm looking at the clock now, I'm at 17 minutes. I said I was going to do 10, but there's so many little nuanced things in there, and failures and successes that we had. I'd love to know if you have questions or what you're doubting or what you can do. I mean, I've got Excel sheets that we used and trackers and all sorts of things that we ended up using and finding that sucked, and, trying to manage credit cards and ultimately finding out that sucked, and, switching to debit cards at some point and trying that. Like, we've done just about all of it. So let me know if you're interested in anything. Comment, and I'll try to answer or make a whole video about it, because I'd love to start talking about this more, because now that we're out of debt, our whole life is different. And for those of you going through it right now, keep doing it because everything feels different. Like when you're done, everything, you can breathe and sleep easier, and don't get back to justifying the debt. The more you justify it, the longer you're just holding yourself hostage with that stuff. I mean, I don't have a problem with having debt. I mean, we have a house payment. We're slowly working towards getting that out of the way, regardless of how you feel about that. But, yeah, just keep going. Keep doing it. It's definitely worth it. Even if you're in a down point in your whole journey through it, just if you make one more payment and then one more payment, even if they're small, towards those debts, like it's going to change everything when you're done. So thank you for watching. I didn't get to everything. I barely probably made sense, but I appreciate it. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, like the video, comment down so I know if you're, into this type of thing. And yeah, I'll see you next time.